join us online here. So Emily has put in the chat room the link for the Blind and Lunch Bunch for today. So if you have not had a chance yet to sign up for that Lunch Bunch meeting, please go to that website, and it's a very quick registration thing. And certainly then when you log in to their meeting, they'll allow you to enter. So we do have one change to announce here, last minute change. Apparently something has come up with Governor Walz, and he will not be able to join us at 11:45. However, the Lieutenant Governor has said that they will join us at that time. So we look forward to that discussion, and certainly hope that you can stick around for that. Does anybody have any other discussion points that you want to bring forward today? Nathan, why don't you update us just a little bit on your perspective of what's going on at the legislature and what we all might need to be reinforcing with our local legislative representatives.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I would emphasize a few things, and I will have, I think during the 11 o'clock hour, I'll do a full legislative update for the group to make sure you guys have all the facts and figures and info that you need. But as we've heard a few times this morning, at the state level, the funding proposals from the various House, Senate, and Governor's office are significantly below what the Governor's Broadband Task Force recommended, which is $120 million over the next biennium, which is the figure that would connect the 157,000 households and businesses across the state that do not have access to 25 download by 3 upload. So this is partially can be understood through the lens of the federal government's announcement of funding for RDOF, various money coming in from other sources. There's just seems to be this cloud over the state, and the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to be extra diligent in reaching out to our representatives. Today we've done a great job letting them know about our priorities, but it's important that in your meetings today and some later this week and in the coming weeks, that you make sure they know how important it is to you as a constituent to fully fund this border-to-border program, because frankly the federal funds are not guaranteed at this point. It would be fantastic if they came in and they worked as they said they're going to, but it's not guaranteed. So that's the message we need to be consistent on, is we've got a grant program here in Minnesota that works really well. We have the funding to do it. We're sitting on $1.5 billion surplus in addition to federal money that's come into the state. We can do this now. We can do it well. We've already have a proven track record. Let's get this job done. So in the next couple months is absolutely critical that we let legislators know how you feel about it. And they hear from me all the time. They hear from people like me, fellow lobbyists, all the time. It carries much more weight if they hear it from you as constituents or as local officials. Just getting that message out to them is going to be really important in the next couple weeks. And as always, if you have questions about getting hold of your legislators or want to schedule a meeting, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you do that.
Box office.
I don't see Senator Bakke yet. I don't believe anyone whose office is on either, but
Are Angie and Diane with us? All right, well, I think Angie and Diane, if it's all right with you, maybe we'll move on to you, and if the senator joins us and you're okay with it, maybe we'll interrupt you briefly and take the senator and then come back to you for additional conversation. So at this point in time, Angie, if you're willing, have you come on. Happy to have Angie Dickinson and Diane Wells, both with the Office of Broadband Development. They both do yeoman's work in helping keep us all informed, organized, and implementing the border-to-border broadband program. Thank you for all you do at the office. And
Senator Bach has entered the waiting room. Looks like
all
he is
right,
here.
well,
Sorry for we almost got the introduction out.
almost got the introduction out, and now I'll have to say nice things about Angie and Diane again here in a few minutes. So,
Good morning.
Senator Bach, welcome. Senator Bach is from Cook and is the chief author of Senate File 22, which is one of the broadband funding bills in the Senate this year. He's been a member of the legislature for 25 years and negotiated many budget bills that included funding for the broadband grant program. And he has made broadband funding a top priority for him in 2021. And Senator, we thank you for that. We thank you for your leadership in the past and your continued leadership on this broadband issue. And thank you for taking the time to be with our coalition here today.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, a little lay of the land, I guess. The state doesn't have a lot of ongoing money. You read a lot about over $1 billion surplus. Most of that is one-time money. It doesn't reoccur in the next biennium. So it's very challenging to find a way to use that in the state budget, because most things we spend money on, whether it's schools or colleges or health and human services or economic development, kind of go down the list, reoccurs in the next biennium, and we don't have money so that can happen. So the good news for things that need one-time infusion of cash, like broadband development, is there's quite a bit of one-time money around, and I'm pretty sure we'll be spending more on the state broadband program this year than we ever have in the past. The only real limits are going to be kind of if we got willing providers out there willing to submit proposals to get areas that are unserved or underserved served, and then kind of what's the construction availability. You can only take on so much, so there are some limiting factors, but my bill mirrors the recommendations of the Broadband Task Force, which is $120 million. I think that's probably doable. We don't know yet how that's going to dovetail in with the federal money that's coming in over the next 6 or 8 years. But we certainly don't want to build systems that are redundant. So I think we're going to have a pretty good year for extending broadband. What's been helpful in driving the narrative, I think, is when kids had to go and distance learn from home. We really found out then across the state where our holes were in our broadband infrastructure. And I can just tell you, in my own personal school district, the St. Louis County Rural Schools, we've got 4 high schools in northern St. Louis County, about 2,000, 2,200 kids, something like that. Well, the school superintendent told me that 80% of those households, when those kids had to go home and learn, were underserved. So they didn't have speeds that were really adequate for the learning that they needed to do at home. So there's a lot of stories like that. So we really got a good snapshot of how poor our system really is in a lot of places. And we just have not been making enough headway. I mean, I put the first money into the broadband program when I was leader of the Senate back in 2014. And since then, we've spent more than $100 million, and I think we've only got to 55,000 homes or something like that. There's a pretty big number that's unserved out there yet. So look forward to working on it, and I think we're going to have some success. Providing we have willing providers that want to build it out. Some areas are tougher than others. They just don't have the density. It may be that we have to put some additional flexibility into that grant program to provide a little higher state match to get some areas served. So we'll learn more about that over the next month, I guess. That's about what I have to add.
Thank you, Senator Bach. If you have time for a couple questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I think we've got Joe Buttweiler. Got your hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Senator Bach, for being here today. As a provider, CTC in the Brainerd Lakes area, and heavily involved in northeastern Minnesota and trying to be more involved, I know there are concerns by some providers about the timeline. If there's too much money, can we get the work done with supply chains and contracting? Our organization feels the opposite. You can't put too much money into the program. We'll get the materials, we'll get the contractors, we'll get the work done. So just one provider's perspective is we will get it done if we can get the funding to do the work.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Thank you, Joe. I guess I'd propose a question to you, Senator. We talked to Representative Eklund earlier, and he kind of gave the House perspective of things. What do you see as the roadmap going forward for the negotiations for the end of session from the Senate's perspective?
Well, it's hard to know because, frankly, it all is going to depend on when the governor gives up on tax increases. You know, he's proposing tax increases. The House Democrats are proposing tax increases. I can just tell you that's not going to happen. That will not happen. You cannot, in an economy that is coming out of this pandemic and a lot of people in a pretty fragile position yet, this isn't the time to start raising taxes. And I just don't think the public will accept it. I mean, it's widely felt that the state has a huge budget surplus in the billions of dollars. And it's kind of true, right? Most of it's one-time money, so it's not something we can just put a bunch of money on the K-12 formula. But, I wouldn't expect the public to know the difference between one-time money and ongoing money. But the notion that you can sell to the public tax increases with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, that's going to fall flat with Minnesota. So I think the sooner the governor gives up on that and the House gives up on that, the more likely we're going to get to a timely conclusion to the session. One of the serious challenges we have is this $2.5 billion that's coming to Minnesota from the federal government. Of course, it all has some strings attached to it. And until we get some additional guidance from the federal government, when the bill was signed on March 11th, they gave the Department of the Treasury 60 days to actually give guidance to how the money can be spent by the states. So 60 days from March 11th is May 11th, and we have to go home May 17th. So I think if we don't get done in time, some of that is just going to be because the federal government didn't give us the guidance that we needed, so we knew how we could spend the money. There's not much point in parking a bunch of money in something that the federal government later is going to come along and say, well, no, that wasn't permissible under the federal law. So we're waiting for that, and if we get slowed down and have a special session, that might not be the worst thing. We make sure that we meet all those federal guidelines that we have for this federal money, because the federal money coming in is much bigger than what the state actually has in the surplus. The two together are more than $4 billion. That's a lot of money, but we just don't know for sure how we can spend it yet. For instance, we don't know the PPP loans that businesses received. That's my bill in the Senate. Federally, the federal government said that those PPP loans are not going to be taxed. Well, under current Minnesota law, they are. So I've got a bill that excludes those PPP loans from Minnesota taxation. It costs about $400 million. But, we don't know if we can use the federal money to do that because that would be considered tax relief. Same situation with the unemployment, that $600 stipend that people received over the summer and into the fall. If we were, the federal exempted that from federal taxes. Under Minnesota law, it's taxable. So if we were to make that not taxable, it's about $250 million. And we generally like to conform with those kind of federal provisions. So you've got 400 in the PPP, you've got another 250 in the unemployment income tax exclusion. Those two together approaching $700 million, actually. if we can't use the federal money for that, it's going to suck up about half of what the state has in the surplus. We'd like to be able to use federal money for that if we can. So there's just a lot we don't know about the federal money yet.
Looks like we've got a question from Jim. You've got your hand up. Jim, do you want to unmute and go ahead and ask?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for your advocacy for rural broadband. I've been learning a lot about municipal fiber over the last year or so, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that as a solution for those rural areas where, we're looking to get one private company to invest in the infrastructure. With municipal fiber, you can have community-owned fiber and have private competition among service providers to use that fiber and provide service. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess when we get to the end and we got areas that are still unserved, it just can't be done. That's kind of probably the last thing I think we probably would pursue. I mean, there are lots of different ways to do it. I mean, you look at what happened up in Cook County. The electric co-op up there took on a large federal loan and they built all broadband for the entire county. So my preference is that we have private providers do it, but there may be some cases when we've got to build out as far as we can where that's not going to happen. We'll have to look for some other alternatives.
Thank you.
Okay. One
I
question we have.
should say on that, Lake County made a little run at that. They got a big federal loan to build out fiber in Lake County. It ended up in bankruptcy. It just never worked for them. So it was then bought out of bankruptcy by a private provider. So kind of where I live, we tried the local government model of getting in that case I think around $50 million of federal money, and still they couldn't get enough subscribers to make it work. So I hate to leave municipalities on the line if the business model actually doesn't work, and then ultimately it ends up on everybody's property tax bill for a failed business effort. So it's not my preferred way to do it.
We'll do, I think, one final question, and then we'll have to move on to the next agenda item. This question comes from Daniel Lightfoot at the League of Cities. So he says broadband infrastructure is very clearly an eligible use for the American Rescue Plan funds. Will you be pushing the governor while the legislature is still in session to authorize the use of those funds for broadband deployment, since that is at least one area that is very explicitly an eligible use?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the good news of the federal money. We know that much, that we could use some of this federal money for that purpose. So, but we got to get into that. We still need proposals from providers, right? So the money will end up parked over at the Minnesota office in broadband, and that's a competitive process, albeit not as competitive when there is so much money around. There'll just be a lot more projects and a lot more money. So, but that money will end up. When we drafted the bill, Representative Eklund and I, it was general fund. We weren't aware we were going to get a bunch of federal money for this, and there was already a bunch of federal money coming in, something north of $400 million. So, but I mean, that's pretty good news that we can use federal money for that. I hope that's the case for the PPP and the unemployment also, because there's just not that much general fund around to make sure that we take care of our K-12 system. Although schools are getting a bunch of money too, maybe some of the stress will be off of that.
Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate your advocacy on this issue, and let's keep the foot on the gas to the end of the session.
We're gonna get something much bigger than what we've ever done before. We'll get done this year.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
No.
We appreciate it, and again, thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day and be safe.
All right. Well, now it's my honor to get back to introducing Angie and Diane, and I really do appreciate all that they do at the Office of Broadband Development and all the work that they put in to help move these grant funding programs forward. They have a great team there, always willing to answer questions, and so I just look forward to what Angie and Diane have to say to us today and where things are moving forward in their office.
Well, thank you for that, Vince, and really happy to be here with you all today. Unfortunately, my colleague Diane couldn't be with us today, but she sends her regards to everyone, I'm sure. Tough acts to follow today in terms of the powerful voices that you've already heard from, and to tell you, it's a privilege for me to get to work with Commissioner Grove under his leadership and with his perspective on how we address the broadband gaps that we face in our state and around the country, and his support of the work of the office. But mostly, I'm grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with all of you, and I know this past year was a tough one in terms of the decisions that the office had to make, and I appreciate the open, honest dialogue that we can all have with one another. I appreciate that more than I can say. I've got a takeaway from today, and Linda Larson, I hope I can quote you in the future. Having broadband is like magic. I love that. Loved hearing that, and happy that you're enjoying good quality of life with broadband internet access thanks to the border-to-border grant program and the partnership there with the folks at Spectrum. I don't want to spend too much time talking today. I want to highlight a few things. Mostly I want to get feedback and input from all of you. The commissioner had already mentioned that the governor's proposal is $50 million for the border-to-border program. There are some other funding mechanisms that I think most of you are aware of. I want to make sure I touch on those briefly today. And the first being the excuse me, the $25 million in broadband infrastructure funding that will be available through DEED Small Cities program. The program is waiting for legislative advisory committee approval before they can issue an RFP, and I'm happy to connect folks who are interested in that funding with the small communities staff. Essentially, that program again can pay for broadband infrastructure, and the high end on that award would be $5 million. And my understanding is that there isn't a matching requirement for that grant. The second thing that I want to make sure we chat about, and I welcome your input on as well, is the FCC's Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. That was the program created with the stimulus funding in December that will pay $50 per month for broadband service for eligible households and up to $75 per month for those on tribal lands. Eligible households can also receive a one-time discount of up to $100 and the purchase of a laptop, desktop, or tablet from participating providers if they make a small contribution towards that purchase. We're still waiting to hear more about who will be participating in that program, working closely with advocates and Department of Education and Minnesota Housing on some outreach initiatives once we have more information to share. And it seems like with a lot of these federal programs, we're all saying that a lot lately. We're waiting for the detail, we're waiting for the guidance. But our office will definitely share information as we receive it. The next piece is NTIA's $300 million broadband infrastructure grant program. They just had a webinar, I think it was last week. Again, another program that can pay for broadband infrastructure in unserved areas of the country. A bit more competitive program, but again, another possibility for projects in Minnesota. And again, waiting for more detail on that program as well. And then lastly, as folks have been mentioning all morning, is the American Rescue Plan has significant amounts of funding that reference broadband infrastructure, along with assistance for the cost of monthly broadband service. As the Senator said, we are awaiting guidance from Treasury on the specifics, and once we have that, we will certainly be advocating strongly that those funds be used for broadband wherever they can. As Representative Eckling mentioned earlier, if the border-to-border program is funded for future grant rounds, our hope would be that the local American Rescue Plan funds could be used as matching funds for a border-to-border grant. With that, I'm going to end my comments with a question and ask all of you how best our office could assist local governments and school districts as these federal broadband funding possibilities become a reality.
That's a great question, Angie. So I'm looking forward to these responses as well. And if you have any other questions on anything other than Angie's, or comments on anything other than Angie's question back to us, please raise your hand using the online reactions part. And
I do have a question that came in the chat from Mike Wimmer. This is a question that came earlier that I saved and I think is most suited for Angie's expertise. And he's wondering if the state has an update on the funds from the December federal bill that will be run through the Small Cities Development Program office that can be used for broadband. And will that be run similar to the border-to-border program, or will it be a separate program? And also, do we have an estimated timeline for when that program could be open?
Good question, Mike. That was the funding that I was speaking about just a moment ago. The funding through the Small Cities Program. That's the community development block grants with the coronavirus relief funds, I think is what that how that is being labeled. The folks have, in the small communities or small cities program have received approval from HUD to use that funding for broadband infrastructure. The next step before an RFP can be released is that they need to get approval from the Minnesota's Legislative Advisory Committee. We're all hoping they get that soon. At that point, they will issue an RFP. And again, those funds can, or the grants can be up to $5 million. And I think they even hinted that they could potentially even go higher. Happy, as I said, to connect you, Mike, or anyone who's interested in learning more about that program with the folks at the Small Cities Program team. But it will, to answer your question, they did consult with our office in putting together their application, understanding they've got federal requirements that guide what needs to be in their application, but they did seek our input. So you will see some similarities to the border-to-border in that application.
We do have another, an answer to your question, Angie, that you asked. This is from Brianna Mummy, who is the economic developer in Redwood County. She says to please continue to advocate that the American Rescue Plan funds to municipalities and counties may be used as an eligible local match.
Happy to.
One other clarification here from Whitney. Please clarify that the SCDP broadband funding is available across the state to all areas, including SLC or current areas that are not eligible for SCDP. There's a lot of acronyms in there. I hope I got them right.
Yeah, that is correct. That is my understanding.
For St. Louis County, SLC, St. Louis County. Okay, any other questions?
I believe that there were some communities that received direct allocations with block grants that may not be eligible through the Small Cities Program because they do receive direct allocations. But for those areas that do not receive direct block grant allocation, Small Cities is available to all of those. So, any other questions or comments for Angie? How are things rolling out with the grant programs? How are we finishing up prior year's grants, and how's that implementation wrapping up? and how are the new ones getting started?
We are wrapping up projects from prior grant rounds. Hats off to our broadband providers and the partners in our grant program for the outstanding work they've been able to accomplish in this past year. I'm still amazed at all of the work that happened during the middle of the pandemic, and those folks went above and beyond. Our last grant round, we've got folks getting ready to start some of those projects as well. Things are moving forward. And our team is looking forward to getting back out and visiting some of these projects. As we've been typically, when we close projects, and at least once during the project term, we go out and actually visit the site. And so a lot of that has been happening remotely in the past year. Looking forward to getting back out and seeing the great work that's been done around the state.
All right. Well, again, Angie, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for your continued work and guidance through the Office of Broadband Development. Obviously, we can't do this without you, and so look forward to continuing to work with you as we hopefully have some new funds to put into the program after this legislative session.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Angie.
At this time, we're going to be joined by April Jones. April is the Deputy Legislative Director and Counsel for U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. And she's going to be visiting with us a little bit about what the senator's been up to in regards to broadband and what some of the future might hold from our friends at the U.S. federal government. So, April, thank you and welcome.
Hi everybody. I'm really happy to be joining you all. As Nathan mentioned, where is Nathan? I'm the Senator's Deputy Legislative Director and Counsel for the Commerce Committee. So I cover all of the broadband infrastructure policy issues. And prior to that, I worked at the FCC on a lot of the Universal Service Fund programs, which I know are very important to Minnesota. And so really happy to be here and kind of talk to you all about some of the things that the Senator has been doing. And I think everyone knows very well that, the Senator really leads on broadband. And as we look at, the next kind of big thing here in DC is infrastructure. I think even this week, the President's team is working on a $3 trillion package, and that certainly is expected to broadband infrastructure. I think I've been in touch with lots of folks about the legislation that the Senator has introduced with House Majority Whip Clyburn, which is the Accessible Affordable Internet for All Act, and that is a investment in about over $94 billion in broadband infrastructure, which covers not only just the build out, but also really critical funding to ensure that low-income families can access affordable broadband, which we all know is a really big issue because it's not just about build out, but also accessibility based on being able to afford it, and also just connecting students, which I think is a huge issue that we've seen, particularly with the pandemic, which has really highlighted how critical access to the internet is. We also. So that was introduced, and so we're working really closely with the House and just trying to see what the future holds. But we are really looking to work across the aisle and make sure that we have strong funding for broadband infrastructure. And also I know as I joined, there was a little bit of discussions about getting things up and running from the American Rescue Plan, which had some funding for broadband, as well as some of the funding that we were able to secure in the December economic relief package. So I think we're very happy that we were able to get some funding, but I think it's the Senator's position that we kind of need to take advantage of the times right now, recognizing that we need strong investments in infrastructure, and absolutely recognizing that broadband is going to be a really important part of that. So she's absolutely kind of leading the charge here, I would say, in the Senate in doing that. And then also, I guess, other updates that are that we have that are positive, which also kind of speaks to really making sure that we are deploying broadband and using the funds that we already have in the most efficient way. I think many of you know that the senator led, she's one of the Democrats leading the Broadband Data Act with Senators Wicker, Peters, and Thune, which was signed into law in March of last year. That was a really huge issue that we've seen and continues to be until we get the FCC maps fixed. I think everyone on both sides of the aisle really agreed that we really needed to get that issue addressed, and that legislation was signed into law in March. And also in the December economic relief bill, we got the $65 million in funding to go ahead and implement that legislation, so we will have improved maps at the FCC. And FCC chair, acting FCC chair, Rosenworcel at the FCC has set up a task force that's really focused on that and trying to get it done in a speedy way. So we're really excited to see the maps put in place and just try and really make sure that we have all the core parts together as we really try and, I think, close the digital divide once and for all. And then, also, I think you all probably have seen that the senator led a letter with over 150 members of Congress to the FCC prior to Chairman Pai leaving about RDOF, so the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And just really making sure that, as they're evaluating the applications, making sure that the providers who have asserted that they can provide certain services are able to do so. We know that was a huge problem. So that's something that the senator is leading here in Congress, and we're just really trying to be on top of that because, it is, again, one of the most important, I think, economic in terms of trying to ensure that we have access to opportunities, whether that starts from access to the internet, to school, jobs, online. Telehealth, everything is really online. So she takes it really seriously and is really just, I think, leading the charge. So happy to answer any questions that you all have. But we have been quite busy here in DC trying to make sure that we're working to kind of complement some of the really great work that's happening in the state, especially with the border-to-border grant program that's also connecting folks in Minnesota.
Thank you, April. And I know that you're all very busy. I can't imagine trying to sit down and read through the thousands of pages that are associated with all those federal programs that are coming through for legislation. So thank you for your work on all of that. Nathan, do we have any questions posted for April?
We've had, over the course of the morning, first of all, April, thank you for being here and making time for us. We've had some questions just generally about RDOF. I know that you said the senator is leading the charge on that letter, in addition to the legislation that she's worked on. I'm hoping you might be able to expand a little bit about what you might see for the future of RDOF. Is she having conversations with the new administration on that front? Any other details you might be able to provide for us? Because here in Minnesota, it's been, at least the coalition's perspective, it's been tough at the state legislature to get funding levels where we want them to be. The specter of RDOF is sort of hanging over all our heads here. So anything you can say there?
Yeah, so I would say, I think stemming or kind of following up from the letter, at a staff level, I've been in touch with them, and I think they're just evaluating what's the best kind of course to move forward. I don't think, with acting chairwoman Rosenworcel, with her kind of taking this on, as soon as she stepped into the seat with a change in the administration, I think they're trying to make sure that they get it right, and that is going to be, I think, determined on whether they, how to address the issue, because we recognize there's a lot of funding that was already kind of in a sense, awarded before like reviewing the long form application. So we're just, I think, in touch with them to see how to address the issue, and also looking like moving forward how we ensure that there's much more rigorous parts in evaluating some of these applicants in terms of like whether they can really provide the services that they say. And we did include that in our when we reintroduced the Accessible Affordable Internet for All Act in terms of the process and that legislation that requires anybody that is bidding for any of these areas to be able to provide more information about their capabilities. So I'm happy to provide more updates, but that's kind of the most recent that I have.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Any other questions for April? Anything regarding just the status of federal funds, federal legislation? Go ahead, use the raise the hand feature or send a chat to any of the hosts. Vince, did you have anything that you can think of off the top of the head that you want to? Well, here's a question. I got one question. So Mike Wimmer is asking. He's curious to know about Senator Klobuchar's view on net neutrality.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's absolutely a strong supporter of net neutrality protections. I actually worked for Commissioner Clyburn in December of 2017, which is when the net neutrality protections were rolled back at the direction of Chairman Pai. So I was there for that moment. That was not something that we were happy about. So and since then there's been a lot of discussions about this in the court and proceedings, and so I would just say, yeah, the senator is supportive of net neutrality protections and has been, one of the first to sign on to legislation that has been led by Senator Markey, which is like Save the Internet Act, and looks forward to being engaged on further ways to restore those protections.
Okay, thank you. Vince, anything else on your end?
No, April, we've had the opportunity to hear from a couple of other federal speakers today. So some of the questions that people may have had for the senator have already been addressed with some of our previous presenters. So don't take that as a sign that we're not interested, but some of it has been covered already. So what I can tell you is that we greatly appreciate the senator's support on broadband and broadband initiatives. We know that she's been a huge advocate for this for many years, and we're happy that now there is some additional push for this, and the pandemic has heightened the awareness and brought some additional attention to it. We're not thankful for the pandemic at all, but we are thankful for the additional awareness of this issue and the need to get it resolved. So again, please pass along to the senator our gratitude, and we're grateful for you as well for the work that you do and behind the scenes with the senator, and for taking the time to be with us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to be here. Happy to share my information if there are any questions that come up, or if folks just want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. This is what I do, so very happy to just share any updates or anything like that. But again, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to continuing the good work on this.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
So Nathan, I think at this time we'll probably turn it back over to you to finish some discussions about where we're at legislatively, what resources are out there for people to access as it relates to broadband legislation that's being proposed, and then also what we should be doing with our local legislators. And you're on mute, Nathan.
I was on mute. I was just saying I was just stalling so I could pull the PowerPoint, really. That's all I was saying. Let's see. Okay, So, just a review of where we're at as a coalition. This year, and this will be reviewed for many of you, but this year we've prioritized the fund at the Capitol, and for the border-to-border grant program that does give out those grants to projects that expand service in places that don't have access, whether that's unserved or underserved areas. And we are running up against this program that won't have any funding left unless the legislature allocates money during the session. You've heard from our bill authors today. Both of the bill authors today have bills for $120 million each. That's $60 million per year over the next 2 years. And that figure is what the task force identified as keeping us on track to meeting that 25 download by 3 upload goal for the year 2022, and putting us in a position to continue investing so we can make sure we hit our 2026 goals of 100 download by 20 upload. You've heard about this, as I said, House File 14 and Senate File 22 from Representative Eklund and Senator Bach. $120 million. There's also another Senate file, 946, from Senator Tory Westrom. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today to speak with us. He's been a tireless advocate over the past few years, and he is the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee. That bill of his also has $120 million, plus he put in a separate pot of money for an additional $30 million to target communities that were completely unserved, so those communities that don't have access to 25 by 3. We're looking at a state budget surplus of about $1.5 billion. The American Rescue Plan put $4.6 billion. That's total for the state and local governments. Bottom line is there's plenty of money out there for broadband. At least in my humble opinion, it's a lot of billions as in B, where we're asking for 120 million, a small portion of that. The targets right now, as I understand them, I'm still looking for clarity on the House DFL position. The Senate GOP position was $40 million over the biennium, which would match what was done last biennium. Governor Walz has put in $50 million in the first year of the biennium, so that's only in year 1. And then nothing in the second year, so that would mean we'd have to come back and ask for additional funding the following year. And from what I'm hearing, but I have not 100% confirmed this is the case, $30 million from the House DFL. As far as what we're looking at for schedule-wise, the legislature is going to take next week off, as they do each year, to get a break from each other, as much as visit with family and friends and then constituents in their district for the Easter Passover holiday. And then they'll come back to assemble those budget bills that Representative Eklund and Senator Bach were talking about. They'll pass those off the House and Senate floor, and those will be competing positions. They will not be unanimous. And then conference committees will be appointed to negotiate the differences between the House and Senate budget bills, and the governor will meet with the legislative leaders. And this is why it's so important that we had this day today. We're getting all of those people in the same room on the same day to hear about how important this is right before they start doing all the work to put the budget together. And then the end of session is May 17th. So we are gonna continue our advocacy. I'm gonna continue being hopefully not a complete pain, but maybe a little bit of a pain to legislators and the administration in the upcoming 2 months. That's where we're standing for a legislative update right now.
So Nathan, where can people go to find out information about the coalition's platform and what we're asking for?
Yeah, so all of our attendees today in the email that you received from us should have received a one-page 2021 coalition fact sheet that contains information about the coalition's position. and I will drop this link in the chat. You can head to our website at mnruralbroadbandcoalition.com. We have all our materials up there, including the policy platform for this year. The policy platform is quite simply to fund the fund and also to defend the integrity of the broadband grant program as we see it this year. We think it's doing a great job, and we just want to keep this train rolling.
Thank you. There was, when we were visiting with Representative Eklund, he brought up his bill, House File 686, which would allow for rural electric cooperatives to use existing easements to provide broadband service. Emily was asked to post the link to that, and that is now posted in the chat room. So if any of you want to view that legislation, please feel free to go there and look at that. We can tell you that the coalition at this point has not taken any official stance on that legislation. It's going through some various comments and revisions, and when the final legislation is available, we'll determine if we want to take a formal stance on that or not. So, are there any questions of Nathan about what's going on legislatively? Any comments about coalition direction or what you think we should be doing, how we can better advocate, things you want to see us respond to?
It looks like there's a question in the chat from Michelle, and she asked if Governor Walz's allocation be allowed for general infrastructure or only education purposes. Could you maybe unmute and clarify a little bit what you mean by his allocation and the question? I want to make sure I get the right answer to you. I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you if you're talking, Michelle.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Technology. So about a month ago or so, when Governor Walz released his budget originally, the broadband dollars, as I recall, were listed in the education part of that budget. So broadband was listed under education. And so that immediately made me wonder if he intended those broadband dollars to go strictly for, helping schools get iPads, pay for services, things like that, or if that would be able to be used in general broadband infrastructure.
So, thank you for clarifying that. I actually have the governor's budget spreadsheet pulled up right now, and I'm looking at it, and the dollars for the border-to-border broadband grant program fall under the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and that's the way it looks on the spreadsheet. It's going to get a little tricky at the legislature, since I believe, I know that the Senate Agriculture Committee is overseeing the allocation of funding. The House has a different committee, which is the Industrial Education and Economic Development Committee. They're the ones that originated the broadband funding. I'll get a little even more technical for you here. That bill is sitting in the Ways and Means Committee and is waiting to be attached like a magnet to the House Agriculture bill. So even though it's not going to the Department of Agriculture, the Agriculture Committee is hearing it. The bottom line is that money will be used for infrastructure and will be allocated to the border-to-border grant program. But I hope my Minnesota Schoolhouse Rock version of how we're doing things this year has been helpful.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Nathan?
Mm-hmm.
I'll just chime in one more time on this, and then I'll be quiet on it. But when will be the time for the coalition to talk about the easement bill? I mean, my understanding is that it's kind of stuck at the moment, and I'm happy to. I'm just not aware of anyone that's opposed to it other than Minnesota Cable, and there might be others, but I'd be interested in hearing from others that are opposed to it, or why would we not just be supportive of it?
One of the reasons is that when we developed our policy platform, policy and spending platform for the year, the fund was the priority, and then defending the broadband grant program from any changes to statute around that. Those were the top priorities. As we've grown bigger as a coalition, we've gotten more members, and oftentimes our members are having competing interests, and so we are not supporting this. I know this is a very squishy answer, but we feel that because the parties that are negotiating this bill haven't come to a resolution, that we're not in a position to support it just yet. The legislative committee met last month. All these weeks are blurring together. The last time we met, the agreement with the legislative committee was that we would wait until there was agreement from all the parties that were negotiating the bill, and we haven't seen that yet. We've seen the counties and the townships and the cities come on board. As you said, MCCA is still opposed. We do have a few more committee stops left for the bill, and we hope to weigh in on that as it goes through that process, but I don't think we're there just yet.
We do have reached out to me. Barbara Dror-Klein has a question. Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, and I wanted to share that we had a very terrific meeting with our county board yesterday about broadband planning. We had LTV on the call, and MetroNet, and BEPCOM, our providers that we've been working with on border-to-border grant. And we've been working very closely with Chris Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And one of the things I learned yesterday is that only 2,200 households in the entire county are RDOF. In some census tracts, only 3 households. So for us to be exempted from border-to-border in the meanwhile, until this gets sorted out, is very frustrating. And if the federal dollars go to D for border-to-border, are we exempt from those as well? But I'm just really hoping for a lot more discussion on the RDOF issue, because for us, I'm sitting listening to all these great things coming in, have no idea what we're going to be eligible, because in one census tract, we have 3 households in it that are funded for $600 a household. So this, can't say enough, but I don't know, we really need to do more diving into the blockage that's here for us.
Thank you, Barbara. We know that that's an issue not just for you, but many around the state, and I know the Office of Broadband Development, DEED, and certainly the legislature are all trying to get this figured out. It really is a double-edged sword here. I mean, we're very appreciative of the federal funds coming in, but it is causing a lot of question marks with how that's going to be blended in with the state funds. And it is unfortunately delaying not just yours, but many other projects around the state as we try and get that figured out. And Angie, I don't know if you want to have a follow-up comment on that or not.
No follow-up comment other than to say that, Barbara, I appreciate you being so open about your concerns there. And like we were saying before, waiting for additional federal guidance about how those funds can be used, and whether or not the federal programs will allow their funds to be used over other federally funded areas, which I'm guessing they won't. But again, waiting for that guidance.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Any other comments on our legislative involvement and actions?
Looks like Perry has his hand up.
Hi, everybody. Just on the heels of this, along with what Joe had expressed on Matt Mossman, and I did meet with Senator Grayheim yesterday regarding his bill, Senate File 1186. While we were appreciative of Senator Drahan is down in our area, so, and we do really appreciate how he's been an advocate for broadband over the years, and his bill would do $25 million for biennium for each year. But he has language in there that our concern was that the appropriation must not be used for areas scheduled to be built out through federal assistance for grants, what you guys are just discussing right now. He was his main concern was where providers will apply and then cherry pick, as that was his language, past some houses, and so he's trying to remedy that. So he wasn't opposed to a meeting with Matt and I again to explore how he obviously he doesn't want the duplicity of federal dollars and state dollars in the area, and he really wants to try to make providers that if they're going to serve an area, they have to serve all the houses in that area rather than cherry pick. It's the sense that I got from him. I'm throwing that out to the group that we've had a really great conversation with him, and some of you who have just a great perspective on this, if you have some ideas, I know Matt and I would love to hear those, and then maybe we can circle back with a long listening class.
Thank you. Nathan, anything else to add?
Yes, I do. There is a bill that's up in the Senate Agriculture Committee this afternoon, Senate File 1536, sponsored by Senator Duckworth. This bill would change the definition of broadband service in Minnesota. Currently, broadband is you are considered to be served, underserved, or unserved based on your access to a wireline connection. The proposal in Senate File 1536, among a couple other things in there, but the primary focus for us is that the bill would add wireline or fixed wireless to the language. We've written a letter as a coalition outlining our concerns with this. I have met with Senator Duckworth and several members of the Agriculture Committee in the Senate. Our primary issue is that especially in places like southeastern Minnesota or northeastern Minnesota, places with lots of hills, valleys, trees, lakes, that sort of thing, even though you may be within the technical range of a fixed wireless link on a tower, that you need that point-to-point connection, line of sight, and in some of our more topographically diverse areas, that we're gonna, run into some issues where there might be coverage might be over-reported. So for that reason, the coalition sent a letter outlining those concerns. That bill is going to be up in the Senate. It doesn't currently have a House companion bill, so we'll keep an eye on that bill going forward.
Anything else to update us on? Or does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, well, if not, I think we are going to take a 10-minute break here. We will reconvene at 11:43, and we will be hearing from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan at 11:45. Again, if you have not taken the opportunity to sign up for the Blandon Lunch Bunch discussions, please feel free to do so now. It's a quick, easy registration, and that link is posted in the chat room. It was posted at 10:20 if you need to follow back up the line of chats there. And when you get to their sign-in page, you can sign up not just for today's Lunch Bunch session, but for future ones as well. So with that, we'll look forward to seeing you all back here at 11:43.